What if I told you that keeping snakes in tub systems and simplistic racks is actually better than those big, beautiful bioactive enclosures you see all the other YouTubers make? Well, they kind of are. Oh yeah, big caveat here, for certain species in certain times. I actually myself don't agree with the title of this video. I don't think that tubs are better than tanks, or enclosures are better than rack, or whatever I called it. I think that for the most part, big, beautiful bioactive enclosures like the ones you see in my reptile room are better than tubs and rack systems, but tubs have a place, they're not obsolete, they're not outdated, and for certain animals, I think they're actually better. There is no one size fits. What are you doing? There is no one size fits all for snakes, lizards, whatever. So just because your reptile does better in this enclosure doesn't mean that mine will. They have different personalities, we set things up differently, we live in different climates, and there's a few reasons why tubs actually work better. So let's break it down into 3 categories. Number 1, why it's better for you, and tubs are more advantageous for you, why it's better for the reptile, and then certain instances where it just doesn't work at all, which is going to be a lot. So the number 1 thing that's good about racks and tub systems for you is it's cheap, and it saves a bunch of time, and it saves a bunch of space. A rack like this one takes up 2 foot by 18 inches of square space on my floor. Now you can't keep an adult ball python in this rack, but you can keep adult leopard geckos, you can keep adult hognose snakes. There are certain animals that it does work for. It fits a tub like this. It's a 28 quart Sterilite container. You're gonna fall. You're not a tree boa, but I know you try. Come on. Come back here. And a 28 container actually works really well for certain animals. Now there are some downsides obviously, but let's continue with why it's good for you. It's very simple to change out the substrate, very simple to clean. You're literally pulling the tub out, you're scooping it back up, and you're putting it back in. And because most tub systems aren't long enough that your arms won't reach, and you don't have to reach into the enclosure, you can reach over top, it actually makes it much easier to clean, much easier to see because you're seeing it from a bird eye view. And overall, from my experience, I can tell you it takes way less time to clean out a rack. Say if you have 10 bins in a rack, or if you have 10 PVC enclosures like I have, it takes, I would say, 5 times as long to take care of the PVCs than it does the racks. Racks. Sound like a pterodactyl there. Another good thing for you is it's secure. And what I mean by this is a rack, as long as it's fitted correctly, isn't going to have escaped snakes because the rack fits perfectly, they can't push their way out, and it's actually most of the time pretty escape proof as long as you push the bit in the whole way. I talked a couple weeks ago about how I had a little escape artist here named Pikachu, and that was my fault. I didn't push the bit in the entire way. But with other things like PVC enclosures, for example, it has these little knobby things here, and the snake can actually, if it does it correctly, push these open if you don't have it locked from the outside. I never lock my enclosures because there's nobody here in my house that is going to go in them, that I don't want to go in them, and it just doesn't make sense to find keys. So it is possible. I've never had it happen to me, and they'd have to do both, or in some cases all 3 of these in order to make that work. And I think it's just not realistic for this to happen, but it is possible where it's not with the tubs. So it's faster, it's way cheaper because they're like 14 bucks a bin or something like that, or if you have smaller ones, it's even less, and it's basically escape proof. Another thing that I want to demonstrate as well is it's actually safer for you. So let's suppose that it's feeding day and you have PVC enclosures. Really the only way to unlock a PVC enclosure is with your hand, or if you have a sliding glass one like this and you slide it, and then all of a sudden, boom, it pops out, right? We all saw that video of the reticulated python biting that lady. That was obviously her fault, but what I do with the rack system is I will use tools, which is just easier. You can use this to pull the rack out, you can use this to grab the rat and feed the rat, and you don't have to worry about your hands being in the way. Now this is something that is a minuscule thing, but I am trying to find reasons to make the title make sense. So it is safer, if you have voracious eaters and don't like getting bit by snakes, which is most of us, by the way. And just one more thing about the cleaning, just the ease for you, and then we'll move on to why it's good for the animal, which is the most important part. Say you have a bin like this that goes in a rack like that. You're gonna have multiple tubs, and because they don't take a lot of room to store and they're super light, you can store them in a closet or away, and you have extras. So you take the tub out of the rack, you take all of the stuff out of it, put the animal into the new enclosure, which you've already set up, the new tub, and then you have that tub that you just took the animal out of, and there's no animal in it. So you don't have to worry about putting it into a temporary container or anything like that, where with a PVC, you have to clean with the animal inside, or you have to take the animal out, put them in a temporary enclosure, clean it up, put it back. You see what I mean? It's just so much easier and faster. Where are you going? Now, a couple of examples of why it's good for the reptiles, which is the most important part, of course. Well, to hit on one of the previous points, it's safe and secure. So your animals aren't getting out, hurting themselves, getting lost, whatever, but also they feel more secure a lot of the time too. Now, there are better ways to do this with PVC enclosures or glass tanks or whatever your enclosure is. Say, the cages enclosure like this, if you want one, there's a link below and a discount code, but either way, this one has one pane of glass and the rest of the enclosure is opaque, so you can't see it. So someone like Diamond feels secure. There's only one way that something is coming towards it, or that's the way the animal perceive it. And the same thing with a tub. If you have a tub like this one, this is a 6-quart tub. I keep babies in something like this, right? And why this is so great for the animal is it slides into the rack. So when it slides into the rack, let's suppose my arms are the rack. Like you can see here, this part is the only part that is actually able to be... He was head bobbing in the reflection of my bald head. Are you kidding me right now? As I was saying, this part is the only part. My arms are the sides, and then the back is the back of the rack. So this is the only part where light is coming in, and you are getting enough as long as you have light in your room, and the only place that a predator could come. So instead of having a tank, which is gonna have 4 or at least 3 sides, where you're gonna have things, people moving, or your dog or your cat or whatever, your animal is seeing threats or perceived threats, or at least something that is stimulating their mind from all the sides. So they feel less secure in most cases in an enclosure like that, where a rack is a cheap, simple, and easy way to cover up 3 sides and make enough light for a day-night cycle, but not enough where they feel threatened, they feel secure. 2 more arguments for racks that are better for your animals in my opinion. Humidity and heat are really easy to keep in a rack. Now you can do this in a big PVC or glass tank or whatever else as well, but in my experience, and I'm sure a lot of people who have tried it with both will tell you that it is much, much easier to keep the humidity right in an enclosure that is not only shorter, but generally is more confined. You don't have to worry about, say, a screen top where the humidity is going to evaporate for things like, I don't know, rainbow boas, or even ball pythons still need a pretty high humidity level most of the time. Where are you going? So in my opinion, that they work better for instances like that. And the heat as well, because you have a shorter space, you don't have to worry about the heat rising too much. It's not rising out of a screen enclosure. You don't have too much ventilation, just enough. Drill as many holes as you need in the tubs, that sort of thing. But I think that it just works better for heat and humidity in many circumstances. And to piggyback on both these things, because you have proper heat and humidity and the animal feels secure, if you have animals, say like hognose snakes or like ball pythons, that sometimes have issues feeding, they go on hunger strikes, in my experience, they eat better, which is why I put Pikachu back into a tub. I never had him in a rack system before, but now I do, simply because it just works better for him. He eats better in a rack. I've done everything possible. I put a million different hides and a whole bunch of different things, turn the lights off in the PVCs. He just eats better in a rack. So I do think for certain individuals, it is better. Okay, so let's get to the part where I kind of crap on the entire idea. Why and for what reasons, and examples of when tubs just do not work. For example, Diamond, and any animal that needs UVB cannot go in a regular rack. Now, if you have some sort of crazy rack that offers UVB, I've never seen any, that's a different thing. All we're talking about here is things like what you can buy from, ARS racks or Freedom Breeder or whatever, right? All great companies, by the way. I'm just saying that keeping things like bearded dragons, Savannah monitors, Euromastics, basically anything that needs a UVB all the time, every day, you can't keep in a rack because you can't facilitate the UVB. Another example of a group of animals that doesn't work in racks most of the time is arboreal animals. Now, there are special racks that do work for arboreal animals. I've seen them before, but we're not really talking about those because you can't find them and they're super expensive, and until this video, until you looked it up, you probably didn't know that they exist. So arboreal animals usually don't work because a tub is going to be about this size. Here, go in there just to show the example. Get in there. Okay, all right. Okay, all right. So to use Diamond as, because this is a full-size bearded dragon, this I think is like 5 or 5.7 inches tall, and you can't really keep anything in that, like a crested gecko or any sort of arboreal gecko or even arboreal snakes just do not work in tubs like this. And lastly, for the examples anyway, huge animals don't work in tub systems. Now, I know that there are some companies that make an 8-foot by 4-foot bin that slide into a rack, and this would be good for an animal that, I don't know, is 8 feet or maybe even 10 feet long, but I wouldn't recommend keeping a 15-foot retic. I know we see it on different YouTube channels, I know. I don't agree with it. I personally think that that animal is too big, and those are still like maybe a foot high, something like that. So you don't really get too much in terms of height. I don't know. I just personally think that is not a great way to keep animals. And if we're just on the subject of right and wrong, I think that the right way to keep a reptile in a rack is snake discovery style, where you have a substrate, where you have things to climb around, things to climb under, you have hides, you have enrichment. I don't think the right way is the way that we've seen in past, right? In, say, the last 10 years, where people just have a piece of newspaper and a water bowl and that's it. I don't keep reptiles like that. I don't agree with it. And I don't think that most reptiles do better in racks. I just think there's certain examples where certain animals do better in certain racks in certain circumstances. So yes, I had to stretch very far to make this title make any sense whatsoever.
You're not fooling me, bud.
So in my opinion, tubs are better for certain animals like certain ball pythons, certain leopard geckos, certain sand boas, things like that. But you're never gonna keep a bearded dragon or a blue-tongued skink or something like that in a rack system, or at least I do not recommend it. So that's my 2 cents on the subject. I did the video because there's a lot of talk back and forth, tubs are always bad, or tubs are always better, or tubs are better for ball pythons, and just, there's no right or wrong answer. And that's what I'm trying to illustrate here. There is no black and white. For some of my ball pythons, they do much better in PVC, so I keep them that way. For some of them, they do better in a rack system, so I keep them that way. I don't hate racks, I just prefer using display enclosures because I like them better. They look better. The reason I have reptiles is to look at them and enjoy them. And it does take a little bit more effort, and it is a lot more expensive to buy 10 PVCs than a rack with 10 bins, but I just personally think that it's worth it. Not only for the animals, but for me too. And at the end of the day, it is a selfish pursuit to keep a collection of animals because we're doing it for ourselves for the most part. So there you go. Okay, I'll put you back. There's a whole bunch of crickets in there, and that's why I was trying to get away from me. I forgot that I fed them immediately before this video. So there you go. That's my 2 cents. What do you think? Do you agree with anything I said? Is there something I said wrong? Is there a slight disagreement? Let me know in the comment section below, and let me know what I should do next week. I take all the video ideas from down there. Thank you so much if you hit like and subscribe. It costs you $0, and it really, really helps this channel. And a special thank you to the Patreon supporters. You guys are freaking amazing. You get discounts on the merch. New line, by the way, link in the description. You guys get videos early, extra videos. You know about several reptiles in my collection that I have not told anybody about. For as little as $1 a month, you can support and be a patron too. I'd really appreciate it, and so would Diamond. And that's it. That's all. Because I do videos twice a week, that means that I'll see you. I always get this wrong. No, I'll do it right this time. I'll see you on Thursday. See you on Thursday.